Okay, so far we've talked about the first. Okay, so far we've talked about the first two reasons how the United States got involved with World War One: the pro-British feelings. The Allies owed money to the U.S. banks. Now we're going to talk about the German U-boat campaign. This is going to be reason number three. Now the British had used their navy to block the Germans from getting supplies. The British had one of the largest fleets, the navy fleets in the world, and essentially what they did was in the ocean that borders Germany, they would just put their British ships out in the ocean and stop any ships that are trying to get to Germany to help them get some supplies. And so they blockaded the country to try to basically to lay siege or to stop them from getting new supplies, hopefully just to eventually choke the Germans out so they'd have to surrender. The Germans fought back, though, because they had a number of submarines. They called these U-boats for Untersee, which means under the sea boats. These are what we call submarines today. And the Germans would run around with their submarines. They would come up every once in a while. When they found a British ship, boom, they'd fire a torpedo at it. Down the British ship would go. Now this upset the British, but what are you going to do? This is the way that you fight war. You find your advantage, and then you go with that. You could say, well, gosh, that's not nice to try to starve out the Germans. The British specifically were trying to stop the Germans from getting more fertilizer. Now, fertilizer is used obviously for growing crops, so you could get more crops, you could generate more food, but it also is used for explosives, for making bombs. And because the fertilizer was not allowed to come into Germany, 750,000, three-quarters of a million German citizens died from hunger because of the British blockade. So, I mean, that was terrible loss for the German people. Now, but the British were saying, well, gosh, yeah, some Germans died, but, you're trying to shoot our boats out of the water. Well, you look at this, 75,000 people died from the German submarine attack. So for every one British person that died, 10 Germans died from starvation. So it was an ugly, ugly campaign. Now, there was two ships in particular. We'll talk about the one ship that really got the Americans upset. Germans warned that their submarines they got to the point they said, we're going to sink any ship, and we're not even going to give you warning. So if you're around Britain, we're not even going to warn you. If we see a ship, we're going to sink it. Because what Britain had been doing was they were taking not only cargo ships, but passenger ships, and they were putting military supplies on these passenger ships. So the Germans got upset and said, hey, if you're going to be sneaky that way, we'll just sink every ship. So what they ended up doing was a turning point for us in the war was the Lusitania. Now this was a British ship. It had docked in New York Harbor. And while it was here, yes, it got a bunch of passengers that got on it, but we also put a bunch of explosives and we put them in the bottom of the shipping hull, in the bottom of the boat. Well, when the Lusitania got close to Britain, the German submarines found it and they said, yep, that's a passenger ship. We said we're going to shoot any of it. When they launched a torpedo at it, it absolutely blew up. It didn't just blow a hole in it and then it sunk, it blew up. Well, why did it blow up? It blew up because there was weapons in the hull. And so now the Germans were saying to the British, see, we told you you guys were smuggling. Here's proof that you are. Well, for the United States, the problem was there were some Americans, not many, but there were some Americans that were killed on that ship. So now Americans are dying in the war. So that's just one more thing that's going to bring America closer to fighting in World War I.